The floor is yours.
All right. Thank you. Well, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for having me. My name is Brian King. I am the founder of Kenway Consulting. Kenway Consulting is an IT strategy consulting firm that's based in Chicago. And I started the company back in 2004 after a 9-year career at Accenture. And I was CEO until January of 2020, and now I am on the board of directors and still am active in the business, helping with business development and sales. And super excited to be here. And I'll get more into my background when I go through the slide deck, but would love to hear from each of you about your career aspirations, your major, what you're studying, what you're interested in, what you'd like to get out of today. Because I would love to tailor the conversation to address questions and areas of interest.
I can go ahead and kick it off. So I'm Serena. I'm a sophomore at Princeton and I'm in business today. So super excited to have been working on this conference planning since February and now really seeing it come to fruition. I am currently an intended politics major and I'm hoping to go into the law field after graduating, particularly sports and entertainment. And so I'm really interested in the realm of consulting, though, just because I think there's a lot of ways to make it a really creative avenue and tailor it to different fields and different areas of interest. So I'm super excited just to learn about the variety and the diversity within consulting.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Jack, also one of the moderators along with Serena. I'm a sophomore at Princeton as well in business today, majoring in history. And as someone who's kind of interested in a variety of different fields, not quite sure where I want to go yet. I think consulting is something that really stands out to me, something that I find really interesting. I like the kind of strategic element to it. And so it's something that I've been drawn to and would love to learn more about today. Either I can pass it off to someone, or if someone would like to jump in and go ahead, the floor is yours for the attendees. Why don't we start with
Hi, I'm Milton. I'm a senior at the University of Chicago, studying history and econ, and I worked for the past 2 years at a healthcare fund, and I'm sort of looking to keep on that sort of sector. But I'm also very interested in hearing about other people's career trajectories and what sort of thought went into making those.
I can go next. Hi, everybody. My name is Mei Lee. I'm currently a math and business student at Northeastern University. I'm also a full-time employee of LEK Consulting, and I'm going to be joining Accenture in the summer as a summer analyst next. Let's see, what year is it? 2022.
I'm AJ Masmila. I go to California Lutheran University, and I'm studying business administration with an emphasis in finance. I'm really interested in real estate. I plan to go into that field as an investor and somebody who's going to go like community development. And but I've always had consulting in the back of my head because I know there's a lot of like basics, foundation to businesses there, and I think I would love to do that if it was not like real estate. And I just want to know more today, and I'm very excited to just learn and just hear everybody's stories.
All right, I think I can hop in here. Hi, everyone. My name is Chibuzor. I am a recent graduate of mechanical engineering from the University of Nigeria. Um, for me, consulting is a very long-term goal, like 20, 30 years from now, because I'm still really young. But of course, it's not too early to learn as much as I can about the industry and about what I would do if I were a consultant. So, of course, I'm very happy to be here. Thank you very much, Brian, for having us today. Thank you.
Okay, I can go now. Hi everyone, I'm Eugenia from Argentina. I'm senior student of international relations here in a university in Argentina, and I'm currently working in PwC in the transfer pricing department. but I'm interested in hearing about some insights on IT focused consulting, because what I do right now is more accounting focused. So I would like to hear some of it and IT related.
Hi, my name is Wanjiro. I'm from Kenya, and I go to Africa Leadership University. I'm a senior in entrepreneurship, and I'm also really interested in consulting, especially in the business sector and in social entrepreneurship. And yeah, I'm really happy to be here.
My name is Ava Augang. I'm a second year also at Northeastern University. I'm a finance major with no prior experience in consulting, but it does sound interesting and I'm excited to learn.
My name is
everyone. Okay, you can go ahead.
Sorry, it's Isabel. I'm a junior at the University of Houston, and I am studying finance, specifically trying to get into the investment banking industry, but I would also love to learn about consulting.
Hey everyone, my name is Lav Nambiar and I'm a final year at National Institute of Technology India. And I interned at Credit Suisse last summer and I'll be joining there next year as a product control analyst. And I'm looking into getting in the field of the financial consulting and investment banking.
My name is Coach Nambiar. I go to Indian Institute of Technology, Kharagpur, which is in India. And for me, consulting is a long-term goal for me. I plan to do an MBA a few years down the line, and after that, I would like to get into consulting. That's it for me.
In May.
Me?
Yeah, I think you're up.
Sorry, I'm chewing a cough drop. I'm just getting over a cold. I am a Northeastern student currently studying math business. I'm at LEK Consulting and I'm gonna go work for Accenture next year.
Wait, I think you already went, didn't you? I apologize if I'm asking.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
It's okay. No worries.
And of course we're recording it, so it's my mistake is there for history, right? Apologies. So yeah, Serena, you can go ahead and bring up the slide and my intro slide while you're doing that. So yeah, my name is Brian King. Like I said, I'm the founder of Kenway Consulting. I started the company back in 2004. So in 1995, I started my career at then Andersen Consulting. And Andersen Consulting was a part of a larger organization that also included Arthur Andersen. So consulting was the consulting side, Arthur was the accounting side, and they rolled up to a company called Andersen Worldwide, and they split. And as part of the split, Andersen Consulting was asked to change its name, and we changed our name to Accenture in 01. So I was there for the name change. I was there for the split. It was a really interesting time at the company. Learned a ton. Spent a little bit of time in financial services and in telecom, and then in 2004, after a 9-year career there, decided to Serena, you can go to the next slide. Decided to start Kenway. You'll see a little bit about my background here. Looks like some of the text isn't coming through in some of those headers, but that's okay. You can see for those Northeastern folks, I was in your neck of the woods for 22 years. I went to Boston College. So when the bean pot comes around, and most of you on the call don't know what I'm talking about, when the bean pot comes around, go Eagles. Spent a year in London, 26 years, if you can believe that, in Chicago. Happy to say that Kenway Consulting employs at least 3 University of Chicago grads, maybe more. I don't have my count in front of me. But 2 years ago this month, I moved to Scottsdale, Arizona, and that is where I am today. I'm not going to drain this, but the last column there is sort of the Kenway statistics. We're at 63 employees today. Like I said, I served as CEO from 2004 to 2020. We're an organization that focuses a great deal on culture. So a lot of my slides are going to talk about culture. And I think as part of the theme of the workforce of tomorrow and the workplace of tomorrow that your conference is covering, I do believe that the companies that can get culture right are the ones that are going to succeed in the future. I don't think when I entered the workforce, the concept of cultivating a strong corporate culture was somewhat foreign to a lot of organizations, and now I think it's becoming a strategic differentiator for a lot of companies. So as you start to consider and embark on your careers, and you're being interviewed, I hope you take the approach of interviewing the company as well, and making sure that you're interviewing that company to determine whether or not that company deserves you. Does that company have a culture that aligns with your own thoughts and principles and ethics and all that stuff? You can go to the next slide. So this is our cultural introduction slide. I won't spend a lot of time on it because really what I want to get to is a lot of Q&A and dialogue with you all. But we went through a concept of in defining our mission, which is mission statement. A lot of companies talk about what their mission is. We like to think of our mission in terms of our why. It's like, why do we exist? Why does this company exist? And why do we as employees choose to work there? And our why, and this is like a 3.5-page write-up that really describes why our company does what it does. But in 5 words, it's to help and be helped. Our mindset is that if we're always on the lookout for ways that we can help our clients, ways that we can help our prospects, ways that we can help each other, our fellow employees, and also how can we focus on how we can be helped, right? So whenever it is that we struggle with something, making sure that we don't muddle through it on our own, that we raise our hand and we solicit the assistance and the wisdom and the acumen that's around us, we're a better company. And the idea is that we're always looking for ways to help, or we're always looking for ways to be helped. And we never want to be that person or that company that simply tries to go it alone, be the passerby, the one who sees people that need help and doesn't stop to help them, or the one that the company that needs help and tries to do it without assistance. So it's a very collaborative culture. It's sort of like the antithesis of a competitive culture. It's very much teaming, collaboration, and camaraderie that we focus on. On the right-hand side of this slide is they're the summarizations of our guiding principles. And I'm not going to drain them, but one thing that I will speak to is that bottom phrase there, means over outcomes. A lot of organizations, whether it's the education system, whether it's sales organizations, recruiting organizations, you name it, many organizations, in fact, the overwhelming majority of organizations, they focus on outcomes. Outcomes being like, how much was our revenue? How much did we sell? How many employees did we hire? What was my grade? If you think about it as being a student. And those are all outcomes. And outcomes are important. But from a Kenway standpoint, rather than evaluating and rewarding people based on the outcome, we reward, and all of our systems are based on the means. Essentially, what does that mean? It means, what did I say and what did I do? Sure, the outcome might be client was happy. The outcome might be we made a lot of revenue. The outcome might be we had great profit. Those are all outcomes. But from a Kenway standpoint, what we evaluate, what we measure are the means. What did we say and what did we do? Did we lead with integrity? When we were in that sales conversation and the client was ready to sign on the bottom line for 1 million widgets, in reality, if they only needed 1,000 widgets, did we sell them 1 million, or did we counsel them and educate them and help them understand that they only needed 1,000? And a lot of organizations would be thrilled with selling 1 million widgets. At Kenway, we wouldn't be. That's the bad outcome. Even though it's a lot of revenue, it would be a bad outcome if what the company really needed, that client really needed, was only 1,000. And I know I'm using a very vanilla example, but that is how we lean into our business. It's how we treat our clients. It's how we treat each other. And it's a very different dynamic than a lot of organizations with whom I've worked, both as an employee as well as a consultant. I'll stop here just for a quick second. Just any thoughts or comments or questions regarding that?
Yeah, I could ask one.
Sure.
Okay, so just leading from what you just said about ethics and principles, I wanted to know what do you do when you are in a difficult situation, like when you something happens in your supply chain or in your value chain or process, and you don't have the means to satisfy a customer's needs at the moment or at the deadline which has been set between you and the customer. Like, how do you handle the situation?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, one of our guiding principles, and if you go back to that last slide, Serena, if you wouldn't mind, you see there's what do you call it? A summarization there called communication. But we have several guiding principles that are about communication, and one of them, as an example, is to communicate swiftly and effectively, even if the information that is being communicated might result in a negative reaction. Right. So the example that you brought up, right? Information has come to light. Supply chain issues are happening. Maybe labor shortages are occurring, and we are no longer able to deliver to the client what we hoped to deliver, and we're not going to be able to deliver it on time or on budget, as an example, right? That's sort of the example you're giving, right? So what we do is, let's hopefully we start to understand that there's a supply chain issue very early, and maybe the delivery date is 3 months out. What a lot of organizations would do is they would wait to communicate something. They would wait a month, maybe 2 months, in hopes that the supply chain improves, and in hope that they could maybe work extra long hours so that they can get the work done by the due date. And then they end up surprising the client very late in the game with bad news. From a Kenway standpoint, our principle is to communicate swiftly and effectively. So for us, what we would do is the minute we understood that there's a supply chain issue, we would communicate a risk, not an issue, but a risk, and say that, hey, there's a risk that this supply chain problem that's taking place could affect our delivery date 3 months out. We're going to closely monitor it. We're going to try to mitigate it, and we're going to constantly communicate with you and let you know status as we go. And then as we go, week over week, if it starts to manifest and it starts to become an issue, we communicate it as such. And in that scenario there, it's so much better for the client, A, to hear the truth, but B, to hear it early and often. So, if it's beyond our control, our hope would be that the client says, hey, Brian, thanks for your honesty. Thanks for your integrity. Thanks for your communication. We aren't happy. We wanted it to be done in 3 months, and now it's going to take 5, and it's going to cost us longer. But at least you were forthright, you were communicative, you were proactive, and you had our best interest in mind. Because not all projects go perfectly, right? These things happen. Pandemics happen, right? Supply chain issues happen. And the art is to focus on the means. And yeah, in that scenario there, the outcome might be late delivery, over budget delivery, delays. Those are the outcomes. But what we can control is what we say and what we do. Anyone else? Okay. You can go to the next slide. I'm not going to spend much time on this at all. These are the 3 columns here are the capabilities that Kenway goes to market with, and the services that line up underneath it are the sort of the sub-services that align to that capability. Real quick, technology solution delivery is our application development space. It's whether it's a custom application in things like .NET or Java, Python, etc., as well as ERP type platforms like Salesforce, Oracle, SAP, etc. That's what we do in our technology solution delivery space. Enterprise program leadership is the overall governance and management of large initiatives. It's bridging clients' business organizations with their IT organizations and managing all the work that rolls up to large programs. And then information insight is our data practice. So think of that as how to govern data from its creation, storage, how it's managed throughout the enterprise, and ultimately how you can report on it. So reporting, analytics, and helping companies make decisions based on the data that they have at their disposal. This is an area that has grown tremendously during my career. The movement in the last 30 years from things that were paper-based to being data, and now data is accessible on everything. You think about Twitter data, Facebook data, Internet of Things. I mean, data is everywhere, and companies who can mine that data and make business decisions from it have a strategic competitive advantage over their competitors. So that's what Kenway does. Before you hit the next down arrow, Serena, just keep it here for just a quick second. Does anyone here know what these symbols mean? It's you can hit one more down arrow. It's a concept called Ichigo Ichi-e, and I've read a number of English translations of this, but my favorite translation is this concept of in this moment, never again. And I think of this as a consulting best practice, but I also think of it as a life best practice that I try to live by. And in consulting, you're viewed as a third-party expert. Companies are asking you to come in because they either don't have the skills or the capacity to address a need that they know they need to solve. And so when you are a third-party expert, you want to make sure that you're leaning into that role and you're living that role before them. And the reason why I say it's a consulting best practice, but it's also a life best practice, you'll understand when I explain it better. In this moment, never again is the idea that this meeting that we're in right here today, this Business Today International Conference, this 1-hour executive seminar, how would you all feel if while I was on this call with you, you could tell that I was distracted by my phone, that you heard buzzing, you heard dings, and I was responding to text messages and kind of half paying attention while this meeting was taking place, or while one of you were asking a question, I looked distracted and I was not looking at the camera. You probably wouldn't feel very good. Well, the idea of this Ichigo Ichi-e is that this moment's never going to happen again. So I have a choice. I can be ever present, uber aware, and super focused and give you the absolute best of me that I can possibly give, or I can give you something less. So Ichigo Ichi-e is about giving the best of you in every moment that you're in, because that moment that you're in is never going to happen again. Never. It's gone that second. And so it's a choice. And I think in consulting, it's very important that we live by this Ichigo Ichi-e concept. In consulting, it's critical that we do that because, again, we are the third-party expert that's brought in to help assess a problem. But I also think it's a life best practice because I feel as though when we are ever present for each other, if we are, giving the best of ourselves in every moment that we're in, then the people that we're with are going to realize that moment is the most important thing going on in our life at that moment, because it is. What else is going on, right? You can hit the next down arrow. So I've already kind of hit these points, but the idea is to be fully present and to really, give of yourself to the people with whom you're engaged, and to just recognize that every moment is unique and it only happens one time. So this slide here, for those of you who are interested in consulting, I thought I would include this slide here just the concept of consulting is so broad. There are so many consulting firms that specialize in certain areas along the spectrum. I have a good friend that I've met here in Arizona that I've become friends with, who owns an HR consulting firm. And, so he introduces himself and he says, I'm a consultant. And I introduce myself and I say I'm a consultant. And I know next to nothing about what his company does. I understand it. I know what he does. I know what he provides, but I would never be able to provide it. Yet we're both consultants because his niche is HR and our niche is technology. Another flavor on this spectrum is the one that I've depicted here, which is the concept of operational versus transformational. And I think when you start to get recruited and start to consider consulting career, it's important for you to kind of, like I said earlier, interview the consulting firm with whom you're meeting and really know where on the spectrum do they reside. Operational consulting has a place in the market. It's huge. It's basically helping the client add horsepower to their already existing team. It could be a scenario where they've got a large initiative that they know they need to embark on. They don't want to hire for it because they view that initiative as short-term, finite. So they don't want to hire employees for it, but they know they need to add capacity to get this spike of work done. A lot of operational consulting firms take on that type of work, help augment the staff in that sort of way. On the other end of the spectrum, you've got transformational consulting, where it's not a question of a company not having capacity. It's more of a question of they don't have the skills. You're helping them transform their business. So you're providing a niche skill that the company doesn't currently have. And this is an example here would be like implementing a new data model or standing up a new technology that the company has never used before. And part of the beauty, as a consultant who does a lot of transformational consulting, what's really fun in this environment is that you're not only dealing with really new stuff on behalf of that company, you're also teaching that company how to use it. And so one of the things that we pride ourselves on is that we don't just come in and design and build something for the client. We also teach them how to run it. We embark on every engagement with the idea that we need to teach them to be successful without us. So this is a transformational consulting, in my definition, is helping a company reinvent itself and then position them to thrive in that new reinvention without you. And this goes back to the means over outcome standpoint. If you do that really well for a company in question, chances are when you wash your hands of that one project, that client is going to be so happy that you've positioned them to be successful. They'll say to you, hey, you did so great here. We've got this other problem over here. Could we use your help there? And that's how longevity of a relationship happens, is you do right by the company that you're working with out of the gate and for that first initiative. And I'm very proud of the fact that Kenway has some clients that have been clients for over 10 years, and we've never had a hiccup in work. And it's not because we keep doing the same thing for them. It's because we keep doing something different for them and taking on the next challenge for them, which is very different than the operational approach, which is very focused on simply providing capacity. I'll stop there real quick. Any questions on this one? Comments? No?
Yeah, I was.
Okay.
Oh, okay. Well, I know that your business model drastically differs from typically like what I think of like other companies as, with the importance of culture. And I was wondering if that ethical and operational framework has brought about any struggles, whether that's financial or moral or anything like that.
Yeah, it's almost like I planted this question, AJ, because I have a favorite story that I didn't know I was going to be telling today, but I'll tell it anyway. In 2017, our largest revenue generating client, which represented about 23% of our revenue, was a completely toxic environment. We had first won work at this client in late 2016, and the needs there were so great, so fast, that our presence there grew overnight. And as we rolled into 2017, we had a plurality of projects in flight, and that's what resulted in it being our largest revenue generating client for the year. But it was a completely toxic environment. There's a famous TED Talk, which some of you may have seen, by Simon Sinek, and it's called Start With Why. And he wrote a book about the same topic. And there's a quote that he has in there, and he says, the goal is not to do business with every company that needs what you have. The goal is to do business with people who believe what you believe. And this client of ours, not only did they not believe what we believe, they had such a divergent like view of ethics and morality and like the way to treat employees that we got to a point where we just couldn't expose our employees to that toxic environment any longer. And we very methodically, from a communication standpoint, swiftly and effectively, we let that client know that we were finishing up, that we were rolling off all of our employees, and we methodically transitioned all of our work to our competitors because we did not want to expose our employees to that nonsense. And And you can look at it from a short-term standpoint and say, yeah, there was a financial ramification. I mean, we lost 22% of our revenue like that. However, the loyalty that resulted from our employees who said, thank you for getting me out of there, and also thank you for walking the walk. Like, you didn't just talk the talk about culture, you actually walked the walk. It was the right thing to do. And I feel like our growth that we've experienced since then is the outcome that happens when you execute great means.
Yeah, that's very, very respectable in my opinion. And thank you for sharing.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I mean, I think it's one of those points that if we were a company that focused on outcomes, we would have looked at that 22% revenue and we would have thought to ourselves, we've got to get our employees to suck it up.
Yeah.
We got to figure out a way to get them to tolerate this environment. Maybe like create a rotation program where we get people in and out in a shorter, there are companies out there who would do that, right? Who would creatively do that to preserve that revenue. And what's interesting is not long after we left, the CTO, Chief Technology Officer, the CEO, and the COO were all let go within 12 months.
Wow.
Of the company. And it's not that it wasn't, we didn't cause that to happen. That's not the point. But what's interesting is that they, as an organization, I think also recognized that they had a major problem as well. And they ended up cleaning house. And, it's, in my opinion, it was good for us that we got out of there when we did, because things only got worse later on.
Wow. That's great.
Any other questions or comments?
Yeah, so seeing your kanji or the kanji on the previous slide made me think about a question I wanted to ask at the beginning. So what really caused you to start your own consulting company? Was it some mindset shift or a real life experience or something else? What really happened?
When I talk about why I started Kenway, I always have to be careful, because part of it did have to do with dissatisfaction of my past employer. And I know some of the folks on this call are going there, but it was also 17 years ago. So things have changed, right? But what I would say is that there were three things that were going on. And again, it's personal. It's me. I'm unique. This was my take on the situation. I don't want anyone to think that I'm disparaging my past employer. But there were three things that were taking place. One was, I think I got to a seniority level that I started to see things that when I was more junior, I just wasn't exposed to. And so when I got to that level of seniority, I started to see, activity that was very outcome oriented, to use that expression, right? Things that were very focused on sales, revenue, numbers, metrics, and not focused on treating people the right way. And there were some people that worked there that were wonderful because they could do both really well. They could treat people really well and have great outcomes. But there were some that couldn't do both really well. And so with so much of a focus on outcome, you had some people that were treating people poorly. So that was one, got to a level of seniority. Two was some of my mentors that I looked up to tremendously retired. And they were replaced with a set of people that I didn't have as much respect for. And that probably aligns back to number one that I just said earlier. And then the third one was that Accenture went public in, I think it was July of 2002. So about a year and a half before I left. And I think the folks that led that process of becoming a public company got swept up in the, what does being a public company mean? They got swept up in things like quarterly numbers, annual numbers, and that outcome orientation that I was alluding to earlier got more and more prevalent. And that was when I kind of had the epiphany that the culture of the slice of the company that I was working in was changing so much that I felt myself trying to change the culture to a way that I wanted it to be. And it got too cumbersome that I wasn't able to change the culture. I wasn't, I was just one person trying to change this, cruise ship, trying to move this cruise ship, and it wasn't possible. So that was when I coined the expression, I'm starting the company that I always wanted to work for. And that's an expression I still use today, that I started the company that I always wanted to work for. And it's something that you have to work towards. It's not like you create it and then you live in euphoria for 17 years. It's a work in process, and daily, weekly, hourly, we're making tweaks and changes and taking suggestions and making improvements to continue to try to make Kenway be the company that I always wanted to work for. Serena, correct me if I'm wrong. Is the next slide after this one, I think, is the last one, right? So yeah, you can go ahead and hit one more down arrow. Perfect. So this is a slide that I like to show. It's also part of consulting best practices, but I also think that whatever industry you select to enter into, I think this is a concept that applies to life as well. And it also aligns back to the conversation that we've been having already about means over outcomes. This is an expression actually that I think I should probably copyright, because I don't think anyone else uses it. If you Google buyer enablement, I don't think you'll see anything. So I really ought to get rocking and write my book and coin this phrase. But this is Kenway's approach to sales, to business development, is we think of it in terms of buyer enablement. Because if you think about our means over outcomes philosophy, right? When a client buys something, when anyone buys something, that is an action that they are taking. And unless you're the buyer, you don't have control over the outcome, right? The buyer is the one that has control over the outcome. So rather than think of sales as the action of like me selling something, I like to think of the action of the buyer buying something. So then when I think about the means, what are the means that are in my control? The means that are in my control are what I say and what I do. So when you think about buyer enablement, I think about the concept of how do I position this person? How do I position this company to make the best decision for them? I'm going to educate them as best as I can on the industry, on the software, whatever it is, on the technology, on the functionality, on the pros, the cons. I'm going to educate them as much as possible. And from a Kenway standpoint, I'll educate them on the costs, how many hours we think it's going to take us, how many people we're going to staff on the engagement, how long in duration will the project take. Educate them as best as possible. And throughout the process, try to provide them as much wisdom, acumen, and expertise as you can. Help them. Give them like free consulting as part of the business development activity. And if they buy, it's because we enabled them with great information, great wisdom, great expertise. We've enabled them to make a decision, and they've chosen us. If they choose someone else, that's fine as well, because the reality is their outcome is only within their control. Their decision to buy something is squarely in their control. So I love this philosophy. I think it, for a lot of people, the concept of selling something can be very uncomfortable. Like trying to convince someone to buy something, trying to convince, think about going to buy a car, think about, going to a furniture store, the people that greet you and they're trying to sell you something. They're trying to, what do I have to do to get you in this car? What do I have to do to put you on this couch? That's uncomfortable. I think it's way better to learn more about what the person needs, what the person's interests are, what their requirements are, and then pose different options that you think might be able to address those requirements. If you do that well, I think the interesting thing is that you'll end up selling more. Or what I should say is they'll end up buying more, right? And the goal isn't to get them to buy. I want to make that clear. The goal is not to get them to buy. The goal is simply to educate them and position them to make the best decision for them. And if the outcome is they choose us, that's a wonderful thing. If the outcome is they choose someone else, that's a wonderful thing. If the outcome is they choose not to buy anything, that's also a wonderful thing. In all three scenarios, it's only wonderful if we do what's right for them and we communicate with integrity and we provide them the wisdom that we have. If we do those things, we're happy with whatever the outcome is. And I think this concept of buyer enablement applies to every industry, whatever you guys end up going into, whether it's banking, insurance, finance. there's always an element that every business is seeking to find clients. I think this is a cool concept to bring to every industry, not just consulting. So any questions or comments on this?
Hello?
Yes.
Hello. Okay. So, hey, Brian, you mentioned that you had a client with whom you worked for like 10 years. So they're also obviously short-term clients as well, which with which you work for projects for about like 5 to 6 months. So I don't know how much of this is true, but consultants are like often criticize that they only have the short-term interest of company in mind and they don't care about the long-term, because after 5 to 6 months they move on to the next project. So how do you make sure that the clients understand that we only have their long-term interest in mind, and how do you make sure that your employees get like make sure that they have the company's best interest in mind?
Yeah, so one of the templates that we ask every project team of Kenway to use, and it's a required document that we start creating the first day of every engagement, is a transition plan. So when we say transition plan, it's identifying all the areas of acumen and knowledge and things that we deliver that we were in control of, and we identify who from the client team will be the recipient of those deliverables, of that knowledge, of that acumen. And we put start dates and end dates, and they sign off. So they sign off that we completed the transition to them so that they could survive without us. To me, that's the ultimate deliverable in answering your question about like, how do we position ourselves to make sure that the client knows that we have their long-term interests in mind, is that we're not coming in like a lot of consulting firms do and just design and build something and then leave and not teach them how to survive without us. We spend that amount of time making sure that we are teaching them how to survive without us. And you're right. We have a number of short-term clients. They're oftentimes mid-market, clients that don't necessarily have like an annual IT spend, but rather they'll spend a big chunk of change on IT maybe once every 5 years, and that we win that type of work. But again, it's finite. It's 6 months. It's a year. Come in, get it done, transition to them, then leave. We also have a lot of larger, Fortune 500 clients where their IT spend is pretty, large throughout the years, and we usually win a decent slice of work of their work every year. But yeah, to answer your question in a more succinct way, it's making sure that we're executing transition to them the minute we start the engagement, and that assures that their long-term interests are very much top of mind.
Oh yeah, that answers my question. Thank you.
My pleasure. So Serena, if you